We are back now for another episode of the Sacramental Charismatic. My name is Luke Geraty, and I am joined today by my good friend Doug Erickson. How are you doing?
Sacramental Charismatics.
Yes. Is that the listeners?
Yes.
Sacramental
I
Charismatic.
don't know what you call them. Charismatic? Maticas?
I normally just call them people listening. So I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have your educational background, so I'm probably wrong.
True. Yeah.
So today we're gonna jump into discussion about I guess, there's a ton of content coming out related to Bethel, Bill Johnson, Chris Valentin, Sean Bowles, and then a host of other things. And then I also think we should do our best to attempt to also be self-aware enough to know that we have skeletons in our closet a bit in the Vineyard. I think I just told you I picked up a copy of Sam Storms's new book about the rise and fall of Kansas City, which I read it yesterday, the whole thing. And
I have not read it yet. So
there's a lot in there that's interesting. So I kind of thought we could, maybe just catch up. I think a lot of our listeners, I think if anybody's on the internet, they have seen, Mike Winger put out a video a couple weeks ago addressing some significant problems related to Sean Bowles's, prophetic ministry, scare quotes. And then I think Mike, the video was nearly 6 hours long. It had all the receipts. I don't think anybody could, deny any of the details that were put out on that video. And then additionally, the next day, Chris Valentin got up on the Bethel Sunday evening service and delivered what I think could arguably be considered one of the worst sermons. And I can't even call it a sermon, but responses.
Response.
Response would be a good word. It was a large combination of him doing cathartic processing in real time in front of hundreds of people. I don't know how many people were there, but and then I think I'm assuming that there was a lot of pushback on that. This is my my assumption.
What appears to be the case, right? You don't have inside information, but from an outside observer, this seems to be reasonable.
Yeah, I don't think everybody under the sun in the Bethel circles seemed to be like, that was not good. So I was actually kind of surprised at how many people came out and had an issue with it. Not because they shouldn't have had an issue with it, but just generally speaking in that world, the honor culture stuff, has prevented people from speaking out publicly. And then Bethel issued a public statement, I think a couple days later, just saying, hey, we're going to be processing, I guess would be the best way to say it. They were processing and they were listening to the Holy Spirit. And then they, on the Sunday morning, they got up. This would have been 2 Sundays ago. Chris, Danny, who's the lead pastor at Bethel, and then and Bill Johnson all got up and spoke and responded and took responsibility, acknowledged the missteps. Chris says that he had on Monday morning. The way he communicated it was like it had nothing to do with maybe other people saying, "Hey, that was really bad." It was like God, spoke to him type of thing. And then he changed his opinion on the way that he had responded. And and so I think that's kind of, where we're at as far as like in the, that no one stepped down. Since then, we've learned there's a lot of people coming forward now with many other stories connected to Bethel's allegedly the cover up culture that's connected there, that Mike Winger has been exposing. Remnant Radio did some episodes. Minor Prophets, friends of this channel, did some discussions about like what should repentance look like. And so you and I have both had a lot of people asking us questions about kind of like, a Vineyard reflection on it. And a couple days ago, I wrote just some thoughts that shockingly a lot of people resonated with, because they were literally just, hey, we're different. Our theology is different. This is why our theology being different matters. So I think that's kind of everything, right? Isn't that bring us up to where we're at?
Well, to this, as of the recording, I would just like to timestamp this as of like 4:07 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Yeah.
6th of February, 2026. This is what we know.
Yeah. And I do think, just to be more specific, the other thing that's out now that is a pretty big deal, I think, is the current, I guess, pastor of prophetic ministry at Bethel, who had, Danny Silk had written a book that included his story, and, he had an affair. The story was that he had an affair and had a moral failure, and then went through restoration, and then came back and has been on staff there and is part of their senior leadership team. But details of that story have come out, and the victim was
not good.
Was 18. Yeah, there's no way in the world that anybody could not hear that story, the allegations, and not think that it was clergy abuse. It was grooming. It was, not just an affair. It was far worse. And so, the way that story's been
clearly a power imbalance. There was clearly some of these things we've come to recognize in victim-centric thought and trauma-based approaches to these things. There's a lot of things wrong.
And and so I guess we've had we have learned in the Vineyard in the last it's been I think reading the New Storms book was a reminder of what we read in the Quest for the Radical Middle, and we get to hear the moral failures that have happened. It seems like as long as the church has been around, there's been leadership failures, there's been abuses, there's been scandals, and
for sure,
so I guess, gosh, on one hand it's like depressing and grieving, and I've had such a wide array of emotions the last few weeks, from one minute of disbelief, although I'm increasingly no longer surprised when it happens. Sadly, I've had like deep sorrow and grief for the victims, because I can't imagine the pain that has taken place in having to hold some of these things for as long as many of them have had to do that, with no recourse and no no like light at the end of the tunnel that maybe this will eventually be exposed and be dealt with. I've also had a lot of anger. Like I'm like, I think those are the three primary feelings around like
same. I would add, just to like a sadness for the victims. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But also just a sadness for the Bethel community, because for the Bethel leadership, is disappointment a thought or a feeling? I don't know. A disappointment that some of these choices have been made. And definitely anger. I think it's been interesting that just reading your responses, like some of the things, is that probably of many of us in our group that we have a lot of theological pastoral conversations with for quite a while, and I think some of this is proximity, just you being so close to Reading, being how far away in Redwood Bluff or whatever. There's a number of ways where you've been kind of a Bethel defender in the sense of some of the weird things that happen there. When I mean, I've heard you say a number of times in conversations, well, not as far as theology, but as far as like how do you, no, well, not as far as theology, but hear me out. But as far as like practically, how do you pastor something this big that's this dynamic that is they have people coming because of their name, because of their reputation, etc. They have people coming from all over the world.
It's no different than like Toronto
things, saying bizarre things that it gets attached to the Bethel label, whether or not it's Bethel or not. And so and I've come to understand a little bit of that. You know, you said that is just that some of these things that their name they've been accused of in the past is to some degree unfair of the Bethel leadership. I would say.
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, cause I even feel that way on, you know, and our church is not, you know, nearly the size of that, but there's, you know, hundreds of people on Sunday morning that I'm like, I don't know these people really, you know?
Right. Exactly.
And, you know, so
and
like, I'm like, don't hold me responsible. Don't hold me responsible.
Exactly. Without going too far into our individual situations, that's one of the things that I've experienced in my own church thing is people are interesting, you know, and everyone's got a story, and you know, and we can kind of get into that a little bit later. So there's a sense that we have to do a legitimate, and again, just like what Subject Prophets and other folks have said, Mike Winger has said, obviously you and I, Tom, Wes, who are involved with this, we are continuationists. You know, so we are I'm not going to use the word charismatic, but we believe in the charismata as an operation of the church, including the gifts, including prophecy. So none of what we say or none of what criticism that comes out is about that proper theologically. Now it might be how it is done. Right.
Methodology,
but
emphasis,
exactly. Some things like that. But this is really an in-house discussion. Can we say that?
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah. I mean, because I think like, you know, what's really been frustrating for me a bit about the topic of Bethel in the Vineyard specifically is I have found that, and it's not just in the Vineyard, I think it's pretty accurate everywhere, is that it seems like there's only two positions for most people with Bethel. It's either they are the greatest thing in the universe and we need what they have and we should just do what they do, or they are a cult and all of them are going to hell.
Exactly.
And and I've always found both of those views deeply problematic. You know, so
they're simplistic.
I just think that, you know, it's hard to take us seriously when we identify positives or we identify concerns that we should avoid if we're not doing our best to represent those, you know, the Bethel's theological trajectories and methodology accurately, you know. So I think, you know, maybe for, you know, for the duration of this conversation, I've kind of been thinking about, you know, I guess how should we talk about this stuff? Because I had an interesting experience yesterday. I had shared with you. I got accused yesterday of, you know, I had made a comment in relation to Bethel and Sean Bowles, and somebody was like, you know, basically like, yeah, you never ever, why are you critiquing Bethel? You know, you've never critiqued the Vineyard. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting suggestion. I have not found that to be accurate. I think you could confirm.
Interesting comment.
Interesting. It was an interesting comment. Yeah, and I have felt like I think both of us have always felt like we want to honor God, and sometimes that means we should talk about things that are not good in our movement. And there's a lot of things that I'm not a fan of, but while still being a vineyard pastor and still being, deeply committed to the movement, and but not at the expense of Jesus or the truth, or best practices, or what is harmful to people, or things like that. So, I'm kind of curious, like, how do you think we should talk about topics like this? Because I think there's some people who would say, hey, all this negativity is, and one thing Chris Valentin said in his train wreck of a first talk was, if we address these type of things, the world's watching and they're going to be like, oh, that's the church. And, they might, it's the way he articulated it was like, if the world hears about all of our brokenness, they're going to not be open to to what we're addressing, essentially, so it's kind of like, hey, let's just keep it out of the public sphere and keep it, hidden, so that way it doesn't, have a negative impact on the world. What are your thoughts on that?
I tell you the truth, whatever deeds are done in darkness will be brought into the light. So that, I think that's even that Chris's response and how he did it is one of the things that I've learned, a number of us in my own community have learned over the last couple years, is that initial emotional response to, we've got to say something. We just has to, there's this pressure, getting all these people asking this and this and this. People need, we have to do something. There's almost like that urgency or that panic. Mm-hmm. That's almost always wrong. And that's almost always not wise. And that's where I think when we hear of these things, number one, I heard this in the Carrie Newhoff podcast a while ago, and talked about in a sermon a few weeks ago that all of us are being discipled by algorithms. So and for sure, it's a fact that my algorithm doesn't look like yours as far as the sources and the kinds of things that come on from social media things.
Yeah,
right?
Yours is like MSNBC and CNN, and mine is just Fox, only Fox. Just Fox.
Fortunately, we're kidding. Neither of those things are true, but they're different. Okay?
Yeah.
And so when we hear things like this, I think one of the things is to take a beat, not hit the keyboard, and pause and give it some thought, give it some time. Because as I have seen things recently in social media about Bethel that are simply unfair or untrue, that people have piled on these kind of things. So, I mean, that's just sort of like a social media conscience 101. We have to apply that in the church too. I think what gets to be a challenge, and what we've learned in our community, is there are some significant tensions between some aspects of true biblical ecclesiology and discipleship, what it means to be the people of God and how to relate to each other, the people of God, and what is sometimes referred to as like a trauma-based approach to abuse, right? And many of these things, I would say most of these things, they take some thinking through. And so in that case, I would say, well, Chris, if the immediate response is to protect the institution or somehow protect the brand or the truth of the matter is most of the folks in the world are going to have their positions anyway. So that's almost ridiculous. But if your first response or reaction is, we have to protect the brand, we have to protect the institution, we have to protect whatever, that should be a red flag.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that to me was like, that was the prophetic, I'm using that word maybe differently than other people would, but that was like the prophetic edge to Mike Winger's question in his first video is, are you more concerned about protecting the movement than, the victims, which is, was because, he's saying, hey, you guys are not warning people, and there's more victims, but I think what you just said is, it kind of just reminds me of, one of my favorite interpersonal relationship Bible verses, James 1:19, let everybody be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. When we're thinking through, but on the other hand too, though, I think there's a lot of truth too, that sometimes like the church and church leaders have to speak, and have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think the other side of the coin is in what the charismatic world has been guilty of for so long is this, wait and see approach to where it's like, well, we're not going to say anything because we don't know. And, we really like that person and their books have been really good. And they've been, to use their language, they've been a blessing to this house. And so, meanwhile, again, there are, victims or potential, soon to be victims. And then it's interesting too. Like, I think that the world actually, when the church does, actually address these issues, I think it's actually a positive testimony to the world too, because we have had to do things a little bit like this in the sense of, we had to deal with a person that was not kind and was attacking people and was going, was being ungodly. And when we did that, there were people in the community that saw the way we did it in a truthful, and we weren't mean spirited. And they started coming to our church because they were like, hey, we think you're actually, maybe you're putting your money where your mouth is. Like, you believe what you're saying, you are willing to take a stand for something. And, so I think that it just seems like, the way that and actually that was what was so, deeply, 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 I don't even know the right word, but watching Chris's first talk was like, this is how not to do it.
Right.
This is literally the worst possible way, and it was like, because it just did not, it was actually like hard to, it was for me as a medium-sized church guy, like we're not, like I'm not smartest guy, but it was like, surely somebody there is saying, stop, like, hold on, let's like recalculate.
Yeah, and that is that balance, right? That first, there's got to be a middle way between the outrage culture where just, it's pitchfork and torches. And I've seen some of that, like towards some of the stuff with Bethel. I would not put Winger or Sidewalk Prophets or some of these guys in that box
minor
at
prophets.
all.
I mean, the minor prophets, sidewalk prophets.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
right. Minor Prophets. Rock Prophets is a band. Minor Prophets, Winger, etc. I would not put them in that, but I have seen plenty of pitchforks that people are quick to judge that side of it.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, that completely seems to be a continuance of a dismissive, this isn't that really writing off the victims' stories and like what Chris did on that thing is just, and Mike, we won't get into that because Mike did it. If you want to hear more about Mike Winger's, get a long kind of discussion of that. You said something about it.
Yeah. But I think, and Remnant Radio, I think did the best overall response
That's right. Yeah. Remnant. Yeah.
Yeah. To why it was, not good. What do you think about, the dynamics that are at play in a lot of these, like, I don't know, large mega church ministries, platforms, like it seems like there's something at work that makes it really challenging to have accountability and to,
For sure.
I guess carry that out. Do you think it's just the system in general? Because part of me is at the point now where I'm getting close.
Yeah, I don't know. That I think there's been a lot of voices that, and especially over the last years, when honestly, what I believe, this is just Doug talking. This isn't Luke and the rest, but that we have been in a long period of revelation, of unveiling, of that the Lord, the Spirit working in the church and revealing things that have long been hidden. And as far as abuse and sexual things and the whole Me Too thing in the church. And we've seen this again and again and again. Now, in some cases, it has been high profile folks like the Michael Browns, the Bickles, other things like any number of people like that, right? But then if you look through like Roy's report, for example, or some of those things, there's also a lot of pretty normal pastors of that 100-member church that really don't have a platform and aren't out there and aren't in that celebrity culture. And so there's broadly an unveiling of stuff. The question does, to the degree that the church, especially to some degree, the charismatic church, although that's actually probably not true, the evangelical church in America, we'll just focus broadly on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the degree that the evangelical church in America has brought into celebrity culture, and that does that bring with it inherently some dangers that we have underestimated or not fully acknowledged?
Yeah.
I think you have to say that it probably does. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Celebrity culture is just bad. I think on a pragmatic vineyard theology level, it really does undermine our theology of everybody gets to play, and it seems like if we can be self-critical for a moment, it seems like it's part of the problem that I have with, the vineyard culture of conferences. Like I have, don't
Here
laugh.
we go. Let's get into it. Yeah. Go ahead.
I remember, I think it was like 20 years ago. I was talking to a vineyard pastor and we were at a national conference and we were both just talking about how it would be really nice to hear a keynote speaker, like a main session from someone that no one knew. Like it just would be cool.
Absolutely.
Like, oh man, it would be so cool to have somebody up there that, is like pastoring a church of 50 people. It's really hard, doesn't know how he can manage his time. He's doing 7 different jobs and, versus, like the really great polished speaker who has, an entire staff that does all the pastoral type of things so they can spend 25 hours prepping a sermon, because it just seems like I actually heard this at I can't remember. You might remember which Society for Vineyard Scholars gathering it was, but someone proposed this question of like which of our practices are undermining our theology, right? Like
was that Jamie Smith?
I think it might have been James K. Smith, yeah, because it might have been in relation to the thinking in tongues. Time, but it's the whole idea of drinking from our own wells was his essential argument, saying that, hey, there's vineyard theologians, vineyard voices that have a lot to offer. You don't have to just keep borrowing from Pentecostals or Baptists, right? And I think a lot of us took that as I felt like that was a serious invitation to continue doing theology, like as a vineyard theologian. Like I think we all did, right? We're like, oh, we have a place. And then we find out, no, we don't. But
you have a place It's over there.
Yeah, it's in the
Go to your
back.
corner.
Yeah, no, your papers will not be accepted.
No.
But I do think that that's a really relevant question now, though. Like in light of we've identified the celebrity culture is not good, and it doesn't mean only 8,000 member church, because I think even in church of 100 people, pastors can be celebrities. Like they can be treated as if they're kings and, like are special, uniquely anointed people of God, but that undermines our theology of the everyone gets to play, and we should be trying to empower and decentralize the authority or influence, or, whatever you want to call it. So
for sure.
But it seems like in a mega church, it's hard.
Man, it is pervasive. It is difficult. I mean, I've known a hand or, been in contact or vaguely know a handful of professional athletes, right?
Yeah.
And who one day are just like they're hanging out, playing hockey with their buds. And the next day they sign a contract and now they're a superstar. And now suddenly they're under the microscope in a way they never have been before.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have difficulty handling that. Or just like they don't want to talk to people. They don't want to talk to the press, because just like, I just want to do my thing. And that happens in the church. We've had adopted that in the church as well. And I think that is going to be something that the church, the Vineyard, we'll just say the Vineyard now, we are going to have to figure out how to deal with that in a major way over the next number of years, because I do believe with you that, it absolutely cuts against the everyone gets to play kind of thing. And, I mean, anyone who is like you have many pastors that are listeners and subscribers to this, Vineyard pastors and other pastors. And many of them I know have had this experience where, if you are a somewhat effective communicator, I don't want to say this negatively, but it's not that difficult to manipulate people based on your gifts, based on I'm not saying that your intention to, but you learn that I could almost say anything and these people would do it. Right. And that's, again, if you're in front of 50 people, you're in front of 5,000, because culturally we're attuned to this celebrity thing.
Yeah.
And and I think God is just ripping that idolatry off of his church, the Vineyard included.
Yeah.
And there is got to be ways of being leaders. See, this is the crux, right? How do you lead prophetically I don't know if this is capital P or lowercase p, in the way that Mike Winger has done, right? We're guiding the church towards truth.
Yeah.
How do you fulfill the role of a teacher, a prophetic leader, and at the same time maintain true authenticity, humility, love, and that kind of thing? Right? All of those traits. I think those are some basic and really deep questions that we as the church need to continually ask ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it so much of this goes back to the intentions of pastoral leadership, like if you're trying to build your platform or your influence versus trying to influence people towards Jesus and the kingdom. And, because truth be told, I think there's something in our Vineyard culture that's why I think it is appropriate to reflect on how this does undermine our theology, because I think the majority of folks probably would not be all that inspired by having some random person get up who's not a great communicator at a conference and share, 5 things they've learned about
you
leadership.
get all if whoever ran that conference,
yeah.
right? Can you imagine the emails afterwards, right? You get railed by people saying,
I've heard national leaders in the past say things like, "Oh, they're just not, they're not that person's not great for the national stage," which I get it,
and
because
there's something to that.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in a local church too. I mean, there's I from Tim Keller's leadership and size cultures paper he wrote years ago. We use that all the time in organizational health development in our leadership courses here, and it's like I always tell people, it's like this is not about whether it's right or wrong. Like how you lead a church of 50 to 100 to 200 to 250 to 400. Like these are just this is just how it is. Like when you have a church of 25, literally anybody can get up and preach because everybody's like, oh, that's Sarah. She's not a great speaker, but I know Sarah, she's like, we had coffee on Monday and she texted me this morning about how she was looking forward to seeing me. When you're at a church of like 250 plus, it's like, you're going to get an email like, hey, that was bad, and, so I guess that's why I just wonder if, we're all part of the problem, I guess, because we all are trying to navigate this tension between the celebrity culture versus gifting, like those things are in tension in some ways, and, but
and we have that absolutely because I mean, there's a piece of that, like you said, that we're fighting against in our own tradition, from John Wimber. And some of that Bethel is fighting from Chris and Bill. I mean, they are amazingly gifted communicators. I believe they are genuine servants of God. They have, all these things. And so there's a natural tendency to just kind of see that as the model,
Yeah.
And I think you and I have had this conversation over time where, over years and people have said some things like, well, the Holy Spirit has left the Vineyard, and it's over in Bethel now, like, especially post JRW, right? It's just like, well, the big charismatic, what you're really saying is the big charismatic leadership that drew you to a certain level has shifted to this other group, Hillsong, Bethel, whatever it might be at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is something that's a game that I'm not interested in playing, a competition that I'm just not going to enter into. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but seeing that as like John Wimber in our story, even though to some degree he really tried to diffuse that, I'm just a fat jazz player trying to get to heaven, even though he tried to diffuse that, it's still really a challenge. I mean, I'm sure you've heard from Wimber family. I've heard a lot of those stories where people would come on a Sunday morning and a Carl Tuttle or somebody else would get up to teach that day, and you'd have people get up and walk out. Big show, or it's not the show I wanted to see. It's not that guy I would ever want to see. It's just like, so it is in our, to some degree.
That's why I do think that part of, I mean, we're literally just reflecting right now. And so I think if we had more time to, process and put together but I think there's a lot of responsibility that lies on us in leadership to be able to, like, that's the thing we can learn from Wimber, is that he did his best to diffuse the celebrity status that he had, and like one of the things that I found interesting about, Wimber, is like, he just didn't, I really don't think he took himself that seriously. Like in everything you hear from him, he never saw himself as like this dynamic, anointed, man of God. Like he just didn't carry himself that way. Cause I think
the
you
OGs
probably saw that.
all say that. for the most part.
I mean, like everybody does. Yeah. Even critics, have said like, I don't like his theology, but he was humble, man. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But he was on a television show with all these like really famous prosperity preachers to talk about money or whatever. And like he didn't say anything for the whole. I mean, he just kind of sat there and listened and chimed in and said,
I know the episode. I know exactly what
said
the
only brilliant thing that you could say, which was basically like, yeah, it's about like it shouldn't be about. And so I've always found that to be really inspiring and encouraging, and also a good model to follow. It's like I don't think we should take ourselves too seriously. Like we should care. It's humility, I guess. It is constantly being reminded of who we serve and why we serve and what we're working toward, right? Because if we start to buy our own PR, it seems like it leads to really disastrous consequences for the church.
And that's right. Exactly. That's where I think along with this celebrity culture, first, like diffusing that is one thing. But then to me, like the next natural step is like, okay, then how do we build in layers of accountability for people that do emerge with a large platforms or influence or whatever?
Yeah.
Because clearly whatever Bethel thought they were doing, and for that matter, I would say this is one of the issues that you and I have had with the whole NAR from the beginning is there's a appearance of accountability without any actual real accountability. When I'm on your board and you're on my board and Tom's on my board and your board and Wes is on my board and Tom's board and I invite Wes to my conference and that's essentially what they're all like, well, who's your accountability partner? Well, Jim and Joe. Well, who's Joe's accountability partner? Well, me and Jim. That's the entire NAR in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the culture of honor, ecclesiology, the, global apostolic
that's a whole
prophetic,
nother, right. Yeah.
I mean, all this stuff is so connected though, because it really is being demonstrated to be a house of cards, because like I've long said that it's interesting to me that you guys are so focused on hierarchical authority, apostolic authority and apostolic influence and apostolic alignment, but like none of you guys actually apostle, in the biblical sense, because it's like, I think there's been and that's the big, the distinction between like John Wimber's, thinking on the fivefold ministry versus Peter Wagner's really came down to the difference between office and function.
Right.
That is like at the end of the day, that really was what it came down to, is where Wimber and I would argue that the New Testament, the Pauline perspective is that those are gifts, empowerments given to the church,
charisms.
They're for a purpose, and it's not about having influence. A title, exactly. Or a really cool lanyard that says apostle underneath it.
Wow, he's got a blue lanyard. He must be something
special. So
right?
because when I'm thinking about like where the breakdown, so what we have, I think it's fair to say, based off of what has come out, because like, so after Winger's video comes out, and after Chris Valentin's, first attempt, then it was like a whole lot of people started saying, okay, let's make a clarification, and what has come out. I think Minor Prophets just did another episode on this that I watched part of, that was really, really quite good, about how it's like, well, Sean Bowles says that his pastor is Bill Johnson, and Cheyenne's his apostle, and like they all have, it's like this triangle, it's triangulation though too, because like, there was actually no accountability. So it seems like, I'm more and more and more increasingly suspicious of non-localized accountability. Like the local church, having actual structures that, and what I mean by that is not a pastor with 4 to 5 yes men and women who are just going to give the rubber stamp of approval. Like what we've always used, and I think I learned this actually from the Alexander Strauch biblical eldership days, when I was really kind of spending a lot of time being influenced by the Reformed, eldership crowd. It was like, you should always work hard to have people on your board that will say no to you. And you should also work really hard to have diversity in the sense of not just full-time pastors. Like, it's going to be good to have, like in our context in Wisconsin, have a farmer who like is farming, 15 hours a day and can't go to 18 meetings, every night, like that'll actually be helpful for you to, because it's so easy to get caught up in your own little church bubble, right? To where, so it just seems like, what we have found, what's been weighed and found wanting is the apostolic, ecclesiology, that is, I think it's demonstrated now that it's not real. None of those folks are doing it.
The whole premise of this new apostolic reformation from C. Peter Wagner, that in these, again, latter days, which is a Pentecostal restorationist concept, is not a kingdom concept. We've been in the last days in the Vineyard, you would say, since the sending of the Spirit on the church, that this restoration in these last days, that there's a new breed of man, as was said about Paul Cain, for example, this new super apostle that would come and be moving in these things. The whole premise was flawed from the beginning, I would argue. And the structure there was just no way they would build a structure that could possibly support that. It just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we've seen companies fail. We've seen nonprofits fail. We've seen churches fail, all with these types of accountability structures. I mean, that was the story of Enron, the smartest guys in the room, right? To the little, we had a story in community not long ago when some youth sports association people, two people who were collecting money for the kids, hockey and baseball fees, or never figure out a way to skim the books, And so we're fighting against human nature, for one thing, of maintaining things, but this issue of accountability in the church and in the church is something that we have to take more seriously. And I think you actually have done probably more reading on John Wimber's ecclesiology, or as far as some of like his church planting or the classic Vineyard church planting materials. And you and I have talked about this before. This is my impression. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I remember, that there was a stage in the Vineyard church planting history when Wimber's advice was to, when you go plant a church, plant it with your friends. Number one, because your enemies probably won't join you. But number two, you need people that are on your side, that are in your corner, that are going to, because it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, etc. And as that church grows, especially in the initial stages, you need people that are elders, however you define that, if that's the same as the folks that meet your fiduciary duties for your 501c3, or whatever that might look like or not. You need people that are in your corner that, will support your ministry. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything accomplished. You're going to be spending so much time fighting, in short. And I think there's some truth to that. I do think, though, what happened over time in the Vineyard, and this is a part of what went wrong in my current church situation historically, is that kind of thinking became normative when the church was 40, when the church was 100, when the church was 400,
didn't develop.
Even up to when the church was 4,000, there was still that kind of like having your friends basically around you was, and it gives the illusion of accountability without any real accountability. And I see that's what's happened on a much higher scale with the Bickles and with the NAR folks, and where we see again and again, even Hillsong, you know, just like some of these things, or some of our friends, just like you said, how can you have a church in Southern California and one of your consul or board members is in the UK? I mean, even if he's the greatest guy in the world, he's in the UK, he can't possibly know what's going on day-to-day decisions.
Day-to-day,
There's no way.
But it also seems like, you know, that's still kind of what we got going on. You know, I think from our national on down to the average, you know, Vineyard church, there still is a lot of that, you know, like, I just think that we haven't really figured that out, you know, just in general. It just seems like, and I get it, because I mean, like I've said, like, if I was, you know, if it's up to me, I'm going to hire the people I like. I mean, that's just no brainer, you know. If I had unlimited resource, I'd be like, Doug, Tom, come on, you know. But I think, you know, it's interesting too, because contextually with Wimber's church planting methodology and the development of how it did develop over the course of, you know, 30 years, that original, the original, you know, Vineyard church planting was a lot of entrepreneurial pioneer, right? So it's like, why would I want to have other people, you know, be making decisions with me? This is my baby. This is my dream, you know, like I'm the one who's selling everything.
Practically just wouldn't work, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, but it's interesting now, because I think with a lot of Gen Z, you know, millennials now who are now old, which is crazy. But, you know, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha will be right around. There's a lot more collaborative church planning, you know, that where people are doing a lot more like, let's do this as a team. There's not going to be one, you know, person who has all the final say or things like that, you know? So, you know,
that's where I think we might see, and I think, you know, we've talked about this as being a subject for future discussion. Something like poly leadership models, like what they just did in St. Louis Vineyard, for example, where they basically set aside the single pastor as a leadership thing. And when transition happened from David Stark to the new thing, they went through a long discernment period and came out with, we don't know if we necessarily need to do that model anymore. So they basically have a 3-person lead elder group community. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see more experiments like that as the church continues to struggle with this issues of accountability and leadership and an ecclesial model that fits culturally, and especially, I think you hinted at it, that hits culturally with Gen Alpha and you know, that is used to a more collaborative, integrative.
I hope our ecclesiology continues to have a lot of room for those, you know, experiments, I think is a good way to put it. While I also I hate that model for the most part.
Well, of course, because could you imagine having to share leadership with me? It would be a disaster.
I would. Well, I just, you know, it's just I think I guess it really depends on the local church and the leadership, I guess is what I think there's so many different variables, you know, and, but yeah, I mean, I think if anything, we've got so many, you know, issues and challenges that we've got to work through, you know, and for me, I can only think about it in our local our local context, like what that's where I'm putting my energy and effort, and, doing conversations that are, I'm always thinking about, like, my comments in a podcast, or if I'm writing something, or if I'm thinking or interacting, it's like, I'm always thinking about in the context of our local church. Like, this is, or churches that we are going to be planting. Cause we're in the process right now, where we have two potential church plants that just kind of came, like, to the surface, and we're starting to think about, what will these be? Missional communities? Will they be a fourth service? Will it, it's like, it's really exciting and fun to try to do, and to have the freedom to be able to, like, experiment, try things out,
And I think that's part of the advantage that maybe a Vineyard theology everyone gets to play, and some of those things does bring to, there is room for experimentation.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth of the matter is we're all fallen, we're all broken. We're never going to cross that infinited qualitative distinction between us and God in Kierkegaard's terms. But so there will be no perfect institution. There will be no perfect ecclesial model. There will be no perfect whatever leadership this side of eternity. Absolutely. But I think the Vineyard, we have the opportunity to explore some things like this in ways that maybe we haven't thought about before. But what is for sure is that the current or the previous top-down, that ecclesial model doesn't work. Whatever it was that the NAR people were trying to do, I don't even know really exactly how to classify that, because again, I kind of choke over the terms apostolic, because again, I have that as a charism, not as an office. So it's hard for me to even think about that in those terms. Whatever that was they were trying to accomplish, that clearly didn't work. And
I mean, I think one to anybody listening, I think I just want to reiterate something we've talked about many times, is that there is no magic bullet or easy fix or quick thing that gets around the necessity of discipleship in the local church. And, whether it's like, oh, this model, or, this model, or if we have these titles, then we just automatically, because that was the ridiculousness of Danny Silk's Culture of Honor book, is the suggestion that the way to have sustained revival, or to have ongoing long-term renewal and revival, was if we just have these 5, offices. I mean, it's just like the most ridiculous, just on its face, of like crazy. Okay.
Naivete. There's a there's a naivete.
That's a great word. Yeah.
So I would say, the Vineyard we are, because of some of our openness to some of these things, we have it in our DNA to be open to new models.
Maybe we shouldn't be.
Well,
I just argued for
open, I hope we to new expressions, maybe open to new expressions of biblical models.
I'm kidding. All those Vineyard people are freaking out right now. I just want to be Episcopalian, but okay. So I wanted to ask you, like, because we kind of danced around a lot of, like, good thought, like how to kind of navigate some of these things. But I am kind of curious about, reckoning within the Vineyard. Like it has been forced upon us to not, because I think what I'm trying to do is, I think there is a temptation to circle the wagons, and I have seen that in the Vineyard, from Vineyard pastors, the organization, and yet I guess how do we kind of like, what is the this reckoning that's happening within the wider church? Because I agree with you. I think it's a move of the Holy Spirit to where God is moving, and he's exposing, and he's purifying, and he's also removing abusers, and he's trying to vindicate. He is vindicating victims. That is work of the kingdom coming.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about, like, what's the way forward? I mean, how do we talk about this?
Yeah.
You know, because it strikes me.
Yeah.
It feels like, and I don't think this is true. You know, I really don't think this is true, but it's hard sometimes not to feel like it. It feels like some Vineyard voices have been publicly, addressed, and then others aren't. It just feels kind of weird. It's weird. I just like there just maybe, and I think most of the time I've come to the conclusion that I think this is just gross incompetence organizationally. Sometimes, like, our organization not very good, or like no one's getting those emails. Like I've told you before, like I don't think that Vineyard pastors check emails. Maybe they do, but I don't. Speaking for myself, but like I don't think there's like a nefarious, anything like that. But it is like, how do we, process this reckoning? What should we do? What should the average Vineyard pastor do? What's our part in that, I guess, enterprise?
Yeah. So coming at it a little bit different, from not as a pastor, but as a, lay leader and a church council person, speaking from our situation, you kind of hit on this earlier, that in our church and I in no way can take credit for this because it was really the pastoral staff at the time and the church council at the time that really made some steps of taking victims' complaints seriously. And that's one of the things that if you look at what seems to be the record, like with Bethel and some of these recent things, is that people had to ask and push and ask and ask and ask and ask,
Yeah.
And so there is something that the church can definitely learn from trauma-based cognition, trauma-based, being trauma aware. And I'm not going to say that I'm 100% on board with all of the things that a trauma-based approach is, because there are some things that we have to, I think there's a lot of it that lives in tension with what we would call biblical discipleship and the call to surrender oneself, lay down your rights. But there is a lot that we can gain from a trauma-based approach. And this is something that we are learning. By no means, I would say, we have become experts or we know it or even practice it, but it's something that we are aspiring to and that we are learning. How can we become a better informed community? And so from simple things like, adjusting policies and procedures and making sure that having the procedures and then making sure that they're actually being followed is the second thing, right? We've done things like trauma-based education for our church volunteers, from youth and children's volunteers. There are practical things the church can do like that. And that, I think, really should be, at this stage in the game, should be bottom line for any church kind of deal.
Yeah.
And being aware of whole concept of trauma and victimization, and that, if it is true, like we also say in our DNA, that the kingdom of God, the gospel comes first to the last and the least and the lost. And those are the people that we want to see, to minister to. Then we will have people that have been broken by life, have been broken to the world, come into our communities. And if that is true, how does a trauma-informed background help us to better understand and minister to people? Because the truth of the matter is, we've had people in our community in the last several years that we've had women in their 70s. This is no joke. When sexual abuse allegations came up in our church, we've had women who are in their 60s and their 70s for the first time talking about abuse that happened when they were teenagers or in college 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And we are way past the time in the church to assume that we've all kind of had the same experience, or that everybody knows that, or that we're all, those days are long past, right? So part of what gives you, what a trauma-based approach gives you, is some awareness of what we are communicating, what we are assuming, what we are claiming to be so. And if you have questions about that, what is he talking about, trauma-based things? Our good friend of the podcast, Jeff Hoxala, in his podcast, has done a lot of work, has done a number of sessions on trauma-based approaches to ministry and things like that. Go Jeff, fellow Marquette alum. And so check that out. I don't know, maybe you can paste that in.
Yeah.
So there are some practical things we can do. The resistant to idolization or a particular, or that kind of putting people up on pedestals and things like that, that is really tough. That is because that is really fighting against the current in our culture. And for pastors, it's just like, well, you're the pastor, you speak to that. I can speak to, as a church member who's supportive of pastors and things like that.
Speak to what? What am I speaking?
Well, speaking to just like, how do you guard your own soul as like someone like you who gets called to, go preach to the masses across the globe. You've been in 110 countries now and things like that.
110. Wow. That's funny.
It doesn't matter if you're speaking in front of 50 or 5,000. The temptations are the same. They're just of a different scope.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do think that for me, what's been helpful to, I'm thinking of the phrase like staying grounded. Would be having a wife and 5 kids that remind me that I'm an idiot on a regular basis and that I am not as smart as I think I am with them.
That's a good one. Having friends that are smarter than you, that's good.
Yeah,
that was wise of you.
Yeah. Tom couldn't make it today, so I had to have Doug on. But so on one hand, I think family is if you are, there is a aspect where you have to have humility to be receptive of that, right?
Yeah.
I do think having friends, like good, solid friends that can help that. But like local church, though, I just am
ideally such an locally, right? Friends locally that.
Yeah, I mean specifically in the context of the local church. I think that if you do not have a church board and leadership team that has actual, real, valid accountability, it's a disservice to you. It's actually, that's the big thing, is it's actually going to harm you, I think, because it's different than because in our local church, we've got, I have a pastoral team that I serve as the lead pastor, and I have, there's there's going to be 8 pastors by March, so I have I've got discipleship pastor, I've got a community life pastor, I've got youth pastors, kids pastor, we have a variety of different pastoral leaders, and at the end of the day, I'm the senior pastor in that group. So it's like, there is a part where, they're very honoring. I think we've created a culture where they will. I've been confronted by them before, but I can't rest on that.
If you could send me their contact information.
I've
got a few things.
They would love to talk to you. Honestly, actually, this is a great little story we have this, one of our pastors, she is an amazing leader. You'll meet her when you're here in March. Great leader, great speaker. And I had said something on a Sunday morning at one of our services that was not, I think, my way of handling, awkward moments is to make fun of people. That's what I do.
Really? I did not know this.
And I'm very good at it. Okay. And so,
sidelight, if anyone out there, any of your listeners feel like they have a personal issue with pride or self-importance, pride, that kind of thing, my recommendation would be to spend an afternoon in a drift boat with Luke.
I am here to humble you.
And all of your pretensions, all of that pride will
I have a gift.
Be healed.
So I said something like, kind of like, I think in a funny, like disparaging, like, oh, the 9 o'clock service, I just said something that was really immature and it was dumb. But I just said it, like moving on. And so she reached out to me and was like, hey, can we meet? And so I was like, yeah. And I was like, I had no idea what it was. And so I said, yeah, let's go meet. We met like an hour later. And I was so like, I was so deeply proud of her though, cause it's like, this, like, she just said,
that's what it is. Exactly.
Yeah. Cause she said, she was like, I just want you to know I love you. I respect you. You are, I look at you as my pastor and I don't want, but I think that might have hurt some people's feelings. And she was right. I was like, when she was saying it, as soon as she started saying it, I was like, yep, she's right. I was like, I couldn't deny it, So, right. On one hand, I think you have like your team, you want to create a culture where they are able to, but I also think you have to recognize that there is
yeah, right, for sure. Yeah. Excuse me, boss.
Exactly. So that's why I think the board, there needs to be some type of a real, accountability structure. Like, because our board has, just like briefly, when they think about their role, it's, oversight, and wanting to help ensure the church being able to carry out its mission and its vision, providing support for the pastoral team. But accountability is one of those words too. It's like also accountability, that if there is something that needs to be addressed, and like now, within the Vineyard, there is a safe reporting process, where if you have an issue with the Vineyard pastor, you can send that into a third party. And I think, like we're about to, it's funny, we're about to put that on our website, just like, hey, that way, if anything ever does happen from myself or any of our other pastoral staff, there is a third party outside process that people can go to in order to address it. Because I've seen you guys. Yeah. I am like, I just want to do everything I can to guard myself and to do our best to have structures in place that can help me continue in being faithful and to help our church not be, a news story, and more importantly, to honor Jesus. Like that really matters. So I think just, as a pastor, and I think there's ways you can do that, that develop, because when you first start your church with, you might have 10 people, you're building your team. It's going to look different than when you have 400 people, we've had to develop that, but I think you have to work really hard to ensure that you're not, setting yourself up for failure. And you want to set yourself up for success and faithfulness.
Yeah. It's interesting because in our situation, that is not just listening to you there. That's sort of what we've done in Duluth Vineyard for quite a while as part of the, I don't know how else to say this, like decentralizing, disempowering, like the Sunday morning experience, especially like the sermon, because we identified that as being one of the things that just so easily feeds into the celebrity culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
that
it's tough.
That just is a thing. I mean, that's so in our situation, that isn't the only, but also it was pretty obvious. We looked around and said, wow, we've got a lot of, if you look at the New Testament talking about what are the qualifications of being an elder, should be able to teach.
Yeah.
Right. We have a lot of people that are honestly pursuing Jesus, that are serious about their relationship with Jesus, and they have the gift of teaching.
Yeah.
And so we currently have 6, 7, maybe more, maybe somewhere between 6 to 8 people on our preaching team.
Yeah.
And any given Sunday, whoever you come in, you don't have any idea who's preaching that Sunday.
Yeah.
It could be a physics professor. It could be a math teacher. It could be one of the staff people at church. It could be some Yahoo that works with computers and fly fishes a lot. You don't know.
Yeah.
But that's
good.
Yeah. And that part of it is just like, because there used to be a lot of, because we saw that if there was certain people that would teach at church, we'd see people get up and leave.
Yeah. And I think it also too, like part of it has to be like, again, I just come back to discipleship, community. What are we trying to build? Because I remember when we first got here and we had this like extraordinary growth, like really quickly, like 3 months we're, 300 people. And,
you went from 30 to 300 in a year or whatever. Yeah.
It was like really, really quickly. And there were people that started, like, hey, like I remember this one guy came out, he's like, I need to meet with you. And we got together and he's like, hey man, I just want to let you know, I'm looking around for buildings and some property and, we can build. And he's like, cause we're going to need a building that's going to be able to accommodate 1,000 people. Like that's around the corner, it was like, and
Red Bluff is what, 10,000 people?
Like 15,000 or something like that. Yeah. But I remember I was like, I was talking to him about how like strategy, cause you've been in our building. Our building's awesome. Like we can fit 300, we can fit 350 in our sanctuary. No problem. Lots of classroom space, cafe. We've got, we're in the heart of this. Like
that's because week 2, you changed the orientation of the chairs.
Yeah. I was like, we actually could make this better, but it's interesting.
Maybe week 4 that was.
No, it was actually this Friday I got here, to be honest. Immediately. Chairs matter. But anyway, we should do a whole episode on that. What was interesting though, because I remember sharing with him, I'm like, hey, we can still be a church that can reach 1,000 people or 12, whatever would be, without having to change our building, because multiple services is our philosophy of ministry. And like we've cast vision a lot for that. It's like we just keep adding services. We've got three English services now at our building and a fourth in Spanish. And like we've just said, we're just going to keep on adding services. And what's great about it is it's a little challenging because a lot of people don't realize how big our church is, because when they come, it's like 200 and something people in the room, and we're like, but it's times, like there's multiple services throughout the week. And so, but it doesn't, so even though our impact and our community size is larger, it never feels like it's more than 300 people, unless we have, like we've done a few, like we'll do a big Christmas party and it's like the whole building's packed everywhere and it's, really fun and whatnot. But I think things like that have been strategic for us, where it's like, again, we can have the same impact as a church of XYZ, but we really try to minimize the exposure to the celebrity culture or to the vibe that it is like, this really big, thing. And, and that's just one way we've kind of tried to navigate it. I think, every church can kind of, it's almost like, and I really look to Wimber as being a big inspiration behind that, is that it is interesting to me that every time Wimber would be at these conferences of 15,000 people, and it was starting to get really hot and heavy and super spiritual, and like, let's get the keyboard us up here, and we're going to start to go into some really powerful ministry time. He would
do that to Steve Nicholson. I'm going back to the hotel room.
Yes.
It's you do ministry time now.
Or he would also, what did he say? And Steve said in the podcast, he said, John Wimber was not afraid of disappointing a large crowd in order to help develop a future leader. That is brilliant. But then even more so,
you're in charge. I'm leaving.
Listen to this. This is even more. Let's not have any music. Let's turn on all the lights and let's go take a break and then come back and start over. Like, to me, like, and I think you and I both, we are products of Wimber's influence and this movement that he was. It's without like question. That stuff is just it's like part of my DNA, like anything I can do to minimize the celebrity culture, that's why it's so weird. Honestly, part of me is so oftentimes frustrated by the state of not just the Vineyard, but just Western Christianity, is because it just cuts against everything I know, or everything that I believe and everything that I just value. It's just like, man, it just doesn't feel like this is just like not as kingdom centric.
Right. And that's it. When you recognize it when you see it.
Yeah.
In a place, it's just like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. 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 So anyway, I am going to be going to a basketball game now for my youngest son, who I should shout him out. He's undefeated basketball season.
Pumas, lizards. What's the mascot?
They are
the geckos. The raging geckos.
They are the Matadors. The Berendos Matadors. Yeah. But thank you for your time. Hopefully I think we're going to continue this conversation.
Yeah,
we will
for sure.
We will have a Vineyardists podcast soon, and I'm actually pretty excited because I don't know if you are familiar with Chris Anthony, who's a theologian in the UK. He did his PhD at University of Birmingham. Shout out to Birmingham. I'm going to have him on. He's going to be. We're going to be doing an episode evaluating the culture of honor. Like he's one theologian that I've actually talked to that
excellent.
Yeah, it'll be I think a lot of good discussion on that, like where the challenges and problems and, the downstream. For me, it's always been the downstream consequence. Like this view down here is this, Right. So exactly. Cool. Well, for everybody who's listening, thank you for listening. Thank you to Doug. I want to also invite everybody. Doug's going to be out in Northern California in March 20th and 21st. He'll also be there on the 19th for the equipping
for the conference. You mean, right?
You will be fishing, I'm sure, as well. And so if you're interested in coming, there's a link down in the description. Cost is only $35. Hey,
boom!
I just want to say $35. That is like literally $100 and something cheaper than all the other conferences that I've seen that are for 2 days. You cannot beat the price. And there's going to be a whole bunch of really great speakers, and why not come out? We've kept it low so you can get here and you can, have housing, get a Uber. Actually, you won't be able to do an Uber. I'm sorry. That's a lie. You will not get an Uber from Sacramento to Red Bluff.
Yeah.
But you can rent a car. Anyway. Yep. Thanks for listening. Talk to everybody soon. See you later, Doug.
Adios.